Okay, welcome to video number 4 in Module 309, Class 4 Driving. And this is an extremely brief video, and it's meant to capture Chapter 4, which is about fuel-efficient driving, and just a couple of pages of Chapter 5, which are about transporting dangerous goods. So this is not a terribly complicated chapter, and it's one they've added in the last few years, but I think they're simply trying to be better on the environment as well as save you money. So they do want you to know a few things. The first is that there are two different kinds of fuels that are commonly on the market now, that during summertime, oil companies start selling a variation on fuel that throws less fumes and burns more efficiently at high temperatures. And in the wintertime, they sell another variation of the fuel, and we call that winter gas, and they simply want to encourage us to make sure that we use both of those in the correct seasons. Not really a big issue for us, but there are some people who work for large companies that buy their fuel in bulk and keep it in tanks and so forth. They want you to plan your route ahead of time and not do unnecessary driving or getting lost. And for us, that's actually an important thing, not so much because of the savings on gas, but because of what it can do to the behavior of the people we're supporting and to their comfort level. And so making sure we plan our route is just a very client-centered thing to do. Avoiding bad weather can really cause us to be stuck in traffic or to have a more inefficient operating of a vehicle. Starting with no throttle. We don't have to anymore push the gas pedal down when we start a car. I remember those days very well. And warming it up doesn't take as long as it used to either, but it is a good idea to warm up your vehicle until the choke goes off. In other words, until the vehicle has reached a temperature where it allows air to come into the motor. When it doesn't have that, it burns just about pure gas. And so when you're driving, you might notice the first few kilometers of driving, you can really smell fuel. It's because you haven't let your car warm up and you're burning gas very inefficiently. When you're driving, they want you to start slowly and not take a drag race type start from stop signs or from signals, to ease off the throttle when you're going up and down hills, because that's where you burn a lot of unnecessary fuel, and to make sure, as we've talked about earlier, that you go into the correct gear, both going up and down. Overdrive only saves you fuel. That's your 5th gear or your 6th gear or the OD button on your automatic. That only saves you money when you're on a flat surface and you're not really going up and down in speed a great deal. When you're having to do lots of stopping and starting, or when you're going up and down hills, you want to use the lower gears and keep shifting until you have achieved kind of that middle range of power. If you have what's called a tachometer on your car where you can see the RPMs, most cars do best when they're in that neighborhood of about 2,500 to 3,500 RPMs, which on your car probably means that the needle is somewhere up around the 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock position on that dial. Maintaining the vehicle is probably the single biggest thing that we can do, making sure that the oil level is correct. You don't want it to be too low because that will wear your engine prematurely and also make it burn more fuel. Neither do you want it to be overfilled. That's not going to cost you in gas. It's going to cost you in a much bigger way, so it can probably damage your engine faster than low oil. So it's important that you learn how to check your oil, and we'll show you how to do that in the pre-trip. It's also important to make sure that your vehicle's tires are properly and evenly inflated. If they are underinflated, then you're creating lots of extra resistance for your vehicle. Maintaining the fluids in your car otherwise, such as the coolant and the transmission fluid, will also make sure your car works at its most efficient. And believe it or not, even something as simple as keeping your car clean and not having a bunch of additional things stuck to the outside or lots of debris in the back of a pickup truck will also help you, because your car will function the way it's designed, in a more aerodynamic way. And of course, the vehicle choice. Some vehicles are designed to be more efficient than others, but that's not something I think we need to spend a lot of time on. Now on page 108 and 109, which are in chapter 6, there is a little bit, I think it's chapter 6, I may want to check that, but in any event, there is a small amount of content that you are required to know about transporting dangerous goods. On page 108, you'll see some diagrams of different placards. That's what they're called, Placards. And you do not need to remember what every single one of those placards means, but you do need to remember that the placard itself is a symbol. In other words, this diamond shape refers to vehicles that are transporting dangerous goods. And as you can see on page 108, There are lots of different variations on those, some that are explosive, some that are corrosive, some are poisonous, and so forth. But when you see that placard on a vehicle, what it is usually a sign holder, and the operator of the vehicle can then pull out or put in a card to show what they're carrying, depending on whether they're carrying a particular type of load or if they're empty. And that placarding system becomes part of how the government tells us if such vehicles are allowed on certain roads. When you see a green circle with a black diamond, it means a vehicle that's carrying transporting dangerous goods can use that road, and a vehicle that is transporting dangerous goods cannot go on a road with this sign here. You'll also notice on page 109 it talks about there are signs showing how to recognize the width and height of a vehicle, and it is important that you make that adjustment when you start to drive these Class 4 vehicles. I do know of people who have mistakenly taken them into underground parking lots and forgotten that they were in a higher than usual vehicle and done significant damage to the vehicle and significant damage to their career as a result. So do start to pay attention to these height signs that warn us as we're going under overpasses, doing things like getting on ferries, or going into underground parking. That's the end of this particular video, not a very long one, but do make sure that you study these pages as well.